Now, let's talk about how we see Pisces throughout the horoscope, what we call the different houses. A horoscope looks like a wheel with about 12 pie slices in it, like a pie cut into 12 pie slices. And the information I'm about to give is actually more for people who have Pisces rising. In other words, based on the time of day that you were born, you may have Pisces rising, but this also applies for people who are Pisces people. And we'll start with the first house and we'll go through the 12th. The first house, which is the moment that you take life, is where we can put the first sign that we're talking about, the sign of Pisces. The first house in the horoscope always shows the identity of the individual and physically what they look like. We've already talked about some of the physical qualities and the physical characteristics. Generally speaking, unless there's a lot of Saturn or a lot of Capricorn or other elements in the horoscope, Pisces people, generally speaking, are not that big. It's one of the one of the smaller signs of the zodiac, and I wouldn't say petite, but smaller, not necessarily gigantic or necessarily long. Generally speaking, the eyes are pretty prominent. There's a full head of hair. The face it can be sort of a wide face, or not round, but a wider looking face. The the appearance may be each time you see them different. Like every time you see a Pisces personality, you may say, gee, you look different. They haven't really changed. You're just perceiving them in a different way because mentally or psychically they're in a different space. There is no ego when you meet them. There's certain types of people when you meet them, you see who they are. You don't really know what you're getting when you meet a Pisces rising. You have to really get to know them a little while to understand more of what they're about. If we move to the second house is always the place where we see our cash flow, our talents, our resources, our gifts, and our values. And we can put the next sign of the zodiac, which is Aries, here. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is very passionate, it is very driven, it is very ambitious, and it is very pioneering. And Pisces people, there are a lot of issues with money and finances with Pisces people, but what's amazing is that they always seem to be able to gather it and group it and bring it to them, even though sometimes they don't feel as though they have it. Aries is very aggressive, so there is a very deep-seated need in a Pisces personality to achieve financially, especially in a pioneering way. There's also a deep-seated need to spend the money, too. This is a very impulsive sign of the zodiac. In other words, I see it, I like it, I'm going to spend it, let me worry about later how I'm going to pay for it. And they go after it, but only if they're interested in it. They put a lot of energy into achieving resources and talents. They put a lot of energy into their values. This is one of the signs of the zodiac that sticks to their values. If they believe in something, they're willing to be slaughtered if they believe in something. And for that reason, you can basically count on them. If they say they're going to do something for you in terms of values or something you believe in, they'll be there for you. They act first, basically, they think later. They're usually using their heads. Aries is a sign that rules the head, so they'll use their heads and their minds. They're very usually quite bright. Sometimes it doesn't appear that way when they're little children because they're in this dream world all the time. But as they get older and they've worked with more focused individuals, they learn to verbalize what the inside mind is thinking. This one thing about Pisces people, they think they tell you because they're so cyclically into it, but they may not tell you. They may just think because you're tuning in like they are that they're going to be able to communicate with you, and that's not necessarily so. So being able to communicate is an area that needs to be worked on, and that takes us to the third house. The third house is always the house of communications. It also shows the kinds of siblings we have and relatives, not mothers or fathers, but relatives. It shows how we learn, the process that it takes to learn, and we can put the sign of Taurus here. Taurus is an earth sign and it's fixed and it's a little slower. So that means that as far as Pisces learning processes go, it may take them a little longer. It's not because they're dumb, because Taurus is definitely not a dumb sign, but because they have to take the information in slowly but surely and chew it and digest it and get it. Once they've gotten it, it's there forever. It would suggest that their thinking is rather fixed. They have very fixed ideas of how things should be done and not be done. It would show they're rather reserved, rather practical. They have a practical approach to thinking and learning, which takes time to develop. They can be very stubborn. If they have an idea in their head and this is what they want, this is what they're going to do. They're not going to change their mind. They'll nod their head with you and tell you they're going to do one thing, but they'll end up doing something completely different, and it's what they in their mind think is right. It would suggest that If they think, since Taurus is a very fruitful sign, that whatever they're thinking about or whatever they're writing about, it has to have a kind of a fruitful quality to it. It can't be just anything. It has to have a purpose. It has to have a creative base to it. Might suggest that they could be at some point very good writers if they have a chance to develop their writing skills, and that it could be very fruitful for them. If we go to the fourth house of the horoscope, this is always the house that rules usually the mother or the primary nurturing parent. Sometimes it's the father. In general, it's the home or early home life, and it's also the root of all the family members that came before you. And even though it's a very important part of the horoscope, it's basically the foundation that you came from. It is also one of the most invisible or most unlikely to be hooked into it's hard to hook into that part of the horoscope. You can put the sign of Gemini here. Gemini would suggest that the experience of early childhood was that either you had two parents, not a mother and a father, but two nurturing parents, like maybe a mother worked and there was an aunt that took care of you. Maybe you had two homes. Maybe you had a lot of people going in and out of your house, because Gemini is the sign of mobility and travel, like people living with you, people not living with you. Might have suggested that there were a lot of people that easily got distracted in the home. It might have suggested, since Gemini is a mentally aware and interested in reading and writing, that you had a home full of people who read the newspaper a lot or listened to television, or a lot of books around, a lot of people that were always talking and mentally communicating. It would suggest that there was maybe one parent who was somewhat easily distracted, who wasn't always there for you. Sometimes they were there and sometimes they weren't. There's always one part of a parent that's not revealed with this. In other words, you think you know one of the parents and you really don't know all of them, because Gemini is the sign of duality. I mentioned earlier two homes. It might have been that you might have had two, not even two nurturers, but even two families. In other words, you lived at the neighbor's house more than you lived at your own house. So it would suggest that there was not a lot of real calming kinds of influences when you were little. There was a lot of activity, a lot of busyness, which might have been rather difficult for the Pisces personality, in that they need to have a lot of time to have that space that we talked about a little earlier. We go to the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of children of the body and children of the mind and love affairs and pleasure and creativity. And we can put the water sign Cancer here, which would suggest there's a vast wealth of creative information that comes to Pisces, that they are very nurturing to their children. Cancer is a very nurturing sign. That the children end up being very nurturing. That you are a creative person, not during the day, but at night, because Cancer is associated with the night. And so it may be, for most Pisces people, that they're night hawks. In other words, it's hard for them to get up in the morning, but they can stay up all night creating and working and thinking and really blossoming, which makes for the best creative work. They say that it's best to create at night anyway, because the energies of the day are very low and there's more of an ability to focus in on what you need to focus in on. They have an ability to feel the pulse of what the public wants creatively. They have an ability to, if they don't have children, and sometimes Pisces people choose not to have children or cannot have children because physically they're unable to do that their creations will become their children. This is good to know for anyone, because some women cannot have children. I mean, nowadays we're seeing a lot of infertility, and we're seeing a lot of women and men wanting to adopt families. And basically the bottom line purpose for feminine energy is to create. If you can't create physical children, then you create something that's mental. And as long as you're creating, life moves forward. And this is one of the signs of the zodiac that has an incredible creative thread that goes on and on and on and on and on. The other thing too, Cancer rules food, and so Pisces do best when they eat and create. They love to eat. If they're in a love relationship, they'll either take their lovers out for dinner or their lovers will take them out to dinner, and that's one of their most favorite activities, that and the movies, because Cancer rules the movies and film and television. We can go to the sixth house, which is always the place of service and work and health and the environment in which we find ourselves working, if we work with or for other people. And we can put the sign of Leo here. Leo is the sign of love, which says you must love your work. It's a very selfless sign, especially when it comes to service. So it would suggest that this is a sign of the zodiac that when it serves you and helps you, it's doing it from a full-bore feeling of love. Work must be play and play must be work for these people. So if something's boring and dull, you're not going to be successful and you're not going to want to do it. There's a lot of pride around the quality of work that Pisces people turn out. Leo is a very prideful sign. And if they feel that they're doing something that's really worth it, they'll put their heart and soul into something, and they'll very much tie their ego up into their work. So you do find a lot of Pisces people, once they find the right work, which is really the key phrase here, because a lot of Pisces people have a really hard time in the logical, modern day, rational world of finding their right work. Once they do, though, they will just pour their heart and soul into their work and be very healing and very helpful and very loving to the people with whom they work. And the same comes back to them. What goes around comes around. If we look at the seventh house, that seventh house is the house of marriage, partnership, and intimate relationship and legal partnership. We can put the sign of Virgo here. Many times, Pisces personalities may marry someone sometimes inferior. Virgo is a sign of someone who's timid or someone that doesn't always have self-worth. That's one way that can be looked at. Or someone that you can heal. That's one of the things Pisces people will do a lot, is they'll hook up with someone that they're always healing and taking care of. They may marry someone or get into a relationship with someone who's very critical, because Virgo can be very critical, but Virgo can also be very bright and very editing and very intellectual and very communicative. So they may also marry people or be intimately involved with people who are very much communicators. And in fact, Pisces people really do need to have someone in their life that's a communicator, in that they are not the world's best communicators. So they have to have someone to bring that out of them. They may serve their mate selflessly, because Virgo is the sign of selfless service. They may also have mates in their lives that serve them, that, totally believe in them and will do anything to make their cause known. So it goes both ways. They may be very analytical about relationship, always thinking about it and analyzing it and trying to figure out how this will work and how that won't work, when in fact the partner may not even be paying any attention. The other way that can be reversed is that the partner may be always analyzing the relationship, and the Pisces personality may be just being in the relationship. So they have something to learn from each other. Pisces is really out there. Virgo is very focused and centered. So when Pisces is really out there, if they have the ideal mate will allow the out there focus, but also bring them down to earth and say, yeah, but you can do it this way rather than this way. And that's the ideal combination. The eighth house we can put the sign of Libra, and the eighth house is the ability to attract resources to us. It shows our sexuality. It is the house that represents the deep mysteries of life, death, birth, and transformation. Libra is a sign of relationship, and it is the sign of the law and the legal system and being fair. And there's a quote, and I don't know where this quote is from, but it is a quote. It says, "Marriage acts as a purifier for the ego." And that's so very important for Pisces personalities to remember. There's a regeneration through cooperation in relationship. There is a gain through collaboration. Pisces people may tend to stay rather isolated because they want that little world for themselves, but one of the lessons here is to learn to embrace and bring other people into your realm of experience and to work with you and collaborate with you, so that the creativity can flow and everybody does their part. And this is one of the lessons. So there can be great growth and great opportunity through partnership. The ninth house is always the house of philosophy, higher education, long-distance travel, university education, and we can put the sign of Scorpio here, which is very compulsive and obsessive. Pisces are compulsive learners. They're obsessed about looking at the big picture, political picture, the governmental picture, why everything fits together, how it ties in. They intensely believe in what they believe in, and they'll tell you always about it. They're loyal to the death. Scorpio is a sign of death and rebirth, to metaphysics and spirit, or if they're basic fundamentalist types, to their religion and their faith. It would also suggest that this is an area that they can always regenerate in. When they feel that their life is sort of falling apart, they go get more education or have more world experience or travel. It regenerates them and brings them back to life and allows them to continue. The 10th house is the house of the father and the career and what we came here to do. And we can put the sign of Sagittarius there. Now, it's also how the public sees you. So it says the public sees you as an idealist and a visionary, that you would be an ideal salesperson, an ideal teacher, because Sagittarius is a sign of teaching, a storyteller, a person that can inspire others to action, and a person who actually has the vision, and because they're such good talkers, can talk other people into making the vision a reality. It would also suggest, in terms of career, that you need to have a long leash and a lot of space, because Sagittarius does not like to be fenced in. It would suggest that you might have had a father, sometimes this is the house of the mother, who was very outspoken, direct, and pointed, Or maybe a father who wasn't around much because Sagittarius has a way of traveling and not always being available because it's out having experiences. It also suggests too that there is the potential to heal people with your vision. And that's one of the beauties of the sign of Sagittarius. We can go to the 11th house now where we see the house of friends, the kinds of friends we have, the kinds of friends that help us in our work. And it also shows us in the community in general and our goals. We can put the sign of Capricorn here, which generally says that a lot of Pisces people tend to have older friends, a lot older friends. They're not usually their age, sometimes 10 to 15 years older, and it's quite comfortable for them, and it may be quite uncomfortable for others. It would suggest that they're very ambitious in their goals and that their friends are very ambitious. It would suggest that their goals, as well as their friends' goals, may come later in life, after the 40th or 45th year. It may suggest that whatever goals they achieve in the community come later because they only want to give the most top quality service. They don't want to do quantity, they want to do quality. It would suggest that they are very ambitious from a very young age, but once they learn how to collaborate with other people, it's more easy to achieve those ambitious aims as they're older. Now we go to the 12th house, the last house of the zodiac, where we find the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign of fusion and separation. The 12th house is the blind spot of the horoscope. It's also where we store our spiritual information and treasure chest. It's also supposedly past life memory. The sign of Aquarius on the back of the Pisces is the suggestion that there is a need to always maintain an element of independence. There's some good news with that, and there's some bad news with that. The good news is that it is the one thing you need in learning how to discriminate between who you should be with and who you should not be with. The bad news with that is because Aquarius can be somewhat detached, is that there's sometimes a difficulty for Pisces people to ask for help or ask to be attached with other people to collaborate and make things happen. It would suggest that there's a tremendous amount of information that always comes into you. It's almost like you're this antenna from a television set, and all this information is always coming into you. But the problem is there's so much information, it's hard to focus on which one to pick. And that's sometimes hard for Pisces people, is how to focus and how not to be distracted. And that might explain Aquarius on the 12th house. There's a deep-seated need for freedom and independence. And there is a memory of nonconformities. If you believe in past lives, and not everybody does, but say there is such a thing, Aquarius is the sign of anarchy and nonconformity. And if it comes at the 12th house, which is supposedly the recent memory, it would suggest that the memory is that I was never a conformist, and if somebody tries to draw me into their group, I'm going to buck and go against that. And that is the memory, and that's not necessarily the reality. So the lesson here is to learn to move past that and not let that be your blind spot or the Achilles heel that gets you in more trouble than it's worth. At this point, we move back to the beginning, which is the sign of Pisces, which is when supposedly you come into life, especially if this is your rising sign. And to close, Pisces is truly the sign of spirit incarnate, and it is the sign of healing, and it is a sign of psychic experience and visionary experience. And if we didn't have Pisces in the course of the zodiac, there would be none of this in the world. And if we didn't have this in the world, we wouldn't have life. We would just have existence. And for that reason, this sign of the zodiac is very important. And yet, the magical thing about it is once it touches your life, it moves on to something else, much like quicksilver and much like magic that can only come when it's needed, and when it's no longer needing or no longer has a purpose to serve, it moves on.